Ubisoft have finally released their golden child AssassinsCreedShadows after multiple delays. To call the game controversial would be an understatement. From its depiction of Japanese culture to its handling of historical accuracy, the game has sparked debate across the gaming community. While some praise its visuals and ambitious scope, others criticize its approach to representation and storytelling, leaving it at the center of intense discussions. AssassinsCreedShadows launched delivering exactly what many have come to expect from the Assassin's Creed series. Monotonous gameplay, an overly bloated open world, microtransactions in a single-player game, and abysmally poor writing. You can tell right away what kind of story you're in for within the first hour of the game. For instance, there's Yasuke who magically understands and speaks Japanese the moment he arrives in Japan, a detail the game never bothered to elaborate on.
Yes, Lord Nobunaga. My homeland is very far from here. All the people there have this color.
And then there's Naoe, who takes a brutal hit to the head with a club only to be perfectly fine and back to normal an hour later. But we're not here today to dissect the story or harp on the two combat mechanics. Instead, we're diving headfirst into the controversy, how Assassin's Creed Shadows embodies these issues and how it upset an entire nation. And before anyone tries to dismiss it as, it's just a game bro, let me put things into perspective. If the rumored budget of AC Shadow is accurate, which is around $250 to $350 million, it might even surpass the budget of Avenger Endgame, which was around $400 million and one of the most expensive movies ever made. That's a staggering amount of money, and considering how packed the game is with cutscenes, it practically feels more like a movie or a TV series than an actual game. But before we get into this video, leave a like and subscribe. Your support would mean a lot to me, and it would allow me to make a higher quality videos in the future. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Historically, Japan has often been romanticized as a land of mystique, honor, and aesthetic perfection. This idealized image has rooted in the 19th century phenomenon of Japonisme, where Western fascination with Japanese art and design led to a school perception of the country as exotic and timeless. In today's media, elements of Japanese culture like samurai, cherry blossoms, and temples are often used as eye-catching symbols to represent Japan's beauty. This can make these cultural aspects feel like they are being packaged to attract attention, rather than showing the full depth of their meaning. Assassin's Creed Shadows tap into this legacy, using 16th century Japan as visually stunning backdrop. However, the game's treatment of sacred spaces as destructible objects and its reliance on stereotypical imagery demonstrate a lack of meaningful engagement with the deeper cultural and historical significance of these elements. While Ubisoft released a patch to address some of these concerns, the controversy underscores how Japanese culture is often reduced to an aesthetic playground, rather than being respected as a living and complex society. This issue isn't just confined to gaming. If you spend any time on YouTube, you probably come across the Stuff I Can Do in Japan videos. These often showcase foreigners exploring interesting places or experiences in Japan, using the country as a picturesque setting. While these type of videos get a lot of attention, they also come with unintended consequences. In some cases, viewers may even begin to see Japan more of a theme park for their enjoyment, rather than a real, vibrant society with its own challenges and depth. That is why we see more and more tension between foreigner and the Japanese local over ignorant behavior. The AC Shadow Shrine controversy was so bad that this issue was brought up in the parliament and prompted the Prime Minister of Japan to comment on it. He said, quote, "Defacing a shrine is out of the question. It is an insult to the nation itself. When the self-defense forces were deployed to Samarra, Iraq, we ensured they study Islamic customs beforehand. Respecting the culture and religion of a country is fundamental, and we must make it clear that we will not simply accept acts that disregard them. The president's response was not just about AC Shadow allowing players to destroy shrine, but rather a broader question regarding disrespectful cultures in games and social media, as well as the resulting issues like over-tourism and vandalism. Instead of appreciating Japan for its full spectrum of history, innovation, and diversity, Japan has become a fantasy world that exists to fulfill outsider desires or expectations. This not only diminishes the richness of Japanese culture, but also risks alienating the people who live it every day. This is why it's important to approach cultural appreciation with respect, curiosity, and a willingness to learn deeply, rather than just consuming the parts that seem cool or aesthetic. The problem with AssassinsCreedShadows aren't just small mistakes. They part of bigger patterns in how Ubisoft handle cultural representation. Ubisoft often says it cares about diversity and authenticity, but their actions don't always match their words. One major issue is how Ubisoft conflates Chinese and Japanese culture. For instance, the game includes a shop menu. Yes, there is a shop menu and microtransaction in a single-player game. You notice they are heavily themed around dragons. This raises serious questions, as the game is set in Japan, yet dragons are widely recognized as a symbol of China's cultural identity. Meanwhile, koi fish, which hold significant symbolic values in Japanese culture, are noticeably absent. This oversight highlights Ubisoft's lack of effort in understanding the finer details of the culture they feature. Instead of treating each culture as unique and distinctive, they lump them together in a way that perpetuates harmful stereotypes. It is clear they didn't prioritize accuracy and instead relies on generic Asian aesthetic, likely pulled straight from a basic Google search. Another big issue is Ubisoft's choices not to feature Asian men as a main character in their game. I don't know if you noticed, but if you look through all their games, you won't find a single one with an Asian man in the lead role. To be clear, this isn't just a Ubisoft problem. It is something we have seen for a long time in the Western gaming industry and Hollywood. I have said this before in my last video. Hollywood has a long history of misrepresenting and sidelining Asian men. They often portray as villain, sidekicks, or comedic relief, rarely as strong or heroic main characters. Asian men are sometimes desexualized or seen as uncharismatic compared to their Western counterparts, reinforce harmful stereotypes that affect how they view in media and society. What makes this so disappointing is that Ubisoft often talks about how they care about inclusivity. They say they committed to making games that promote diversity and representation. But here they are choosing not to give Asian men leading roles, even in game based on Asian culture and history. It feels like they're not living up to their promises. By leaving Asian men out of lead roles, Ubisoft continued these outdated stereotypes and missed a great opportunity to challenging these ideas. They could have told new, meaningful stories and create games that truly reflect the diversity they claim to support, instead of sticking to harmful industry norms. And then there's Yasuke, the African samurai who served under Oda Nobunaga. Yasuke's story is fascinating and the only interesting story in the game. However, Ubisoft turned him into the main heroes of Japan, even though there isn't much historical evidence to support that. By making Yasuke's role bigger to appeal to Western audiences, Ubisoft ends up changing historical facts. This feels like cultural imperialism, where history is altered to sell a story instead of respecting the real complexity of the past. To help expand on this point, I want to ask, have you ever played a game of Monopoly?
Have you ever played the Parker Brothers game, Monopoly? Monopoly is currently published in 47 languages. They sell it in over 114 countries.
The story of the board game Monopoly, originally designed by Elizabeth Magie as the landlord's game, Magie's intent was to ridicule capitalism and monopolistic practices. But iterations upon iterations of the game strip away its crucial message, transforming it to a celebration of wealth and property.
I'm talking to you about iterations. Iterations. Over time. Diluting the message. Obscuring the original.
Similarly, AssassinsCreedShadows' iteration of Yasuke's story, focusing on heroism and martial prowess, while neglecting the complexity of his life in feudal Japan, feel the same as Monopoly's original message was overshadowed. Iteration of historical role is overblown to fit a marketable entertainment trope. The portrayal of Yasuke in AC Shadow feels shallow and underdeveloped. His journey lacks any real depth or meaningful conflicts, as he is depicted as an almost superhuman figure, a towering 6-foot-tall warrior, effortlessly overpowering smaller Japanese foes, even to the point of running through concrete. Meanwhile, his African origins are left completely unexplored, leaving major questions unanswered. For instance, how did Yasuke, a strong warrior in his homeland, ended up as a slave to the Jesuit? How does he suddenly understand and speak Japanese so well, even though he's never been there? Ubisoft doesn't address any of this. Yasuke begins the story as an honorable, loyal, and strong warrior, and by the end, he remained exactly the same. This lack of character growth, combined with the absence of meaningful backstory, makes it feel as though he was hastily inserted into the plot, a role that could just as easily has been filled by an Asian protagonist. I think Fictional Life said best about Yasuke feeling like he cosplaying a Japanese man.
Actual journey from servant to samurai is fast-forwarded, lacks depth, challenge, or world building, and ultimately presents you with what feels like a Japanese person wearing a Yasuke costume. And I say this largely because besides children, the people Yasuke meets in his travels barely ever acknowledge he is a foreigner. They never react strangely or interested, and they interact with him as though he isn't any different than any other lord. People bow to him as if he's the shogun or daimyo, the ladies can't get enough of him, and the tiny locals have no chance against his physical prowess, including the most experienced and hardened generals, warriors, and shinobis of the time period that have been training and waging war their entire lives.
By perpetuating stereotypes, marginalizing non-Western perspectives, and rewriting history for commercial gain, Ubisoft reinforced patterns of cultural imperialism, and I think this game is just highlighting a broader issue with cultural fetishization as a whole. It allows those outside the culture to shape its global image, often prioritizing their own desires over the experiences and voices of the people within that culture, where the East was portrayed as exotic and different by Western powers, often for their own benefit. Assassin's Creed Shadows is a clear example of cultural fetishization. It focuses on how cool or exotic Japanese culture looks while also pushing Western ideas. Ubisoft's game might look amazing with their stunning visual and big storylines, but their constant hypocrisy damage their credibility and keep old, harmful industry practices alive. This issue isn't just about video games. It also happens in real life. Influencers and content creators often use cultures like Japan as a pretty backdrop, making it seem like an aesthetic playground. This way of looking at cultures simplifies and romanticizing them, turning them into something to admire from afar without truly understanding them. By only focusing on the most eye-catching parts, creators take away the depth and richness that make a culture special. This video has been challenging to put together, as explaining these issues to Western audiences isn't always easy. As someone who comes from a country rich in cultures and history myself, I deeply understand how much these elements shape our identity. Culture and history are what make each of us unique in this world. They what make us human. And this tendency to lump all cultures together under the banner of multiculturalism further strip away what makes each one unique. As we look critically at media like this, it is important to recognize the responsibilities of creators, be it in games, movie, or social media, to move beyond surface level representation. Authentic storytelling not only respect the cultures being portrayed, but also enrich the experiences for audiences by offering depth, honesty, and connections. In the end, cultural representation isn't just about entertainment. It's about respect, understanding, and breaking free from the outdated stereotype that continue to hold us back. And that's about it, folks. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe, and I see you next time.